The encounter. The space station buzzed with activity, a melting pot of species from across the galaxy. Neon lights flickered on the metallic walls, and the hum of starship engines echoed faintly in the background. Alex sat alone at a small corner table in a dingy cafe, stirring his lukewarm cup of synth coffee. He wasn't here for the ambience. This place was a pit stop, a brief pause in his otherwise uneventful life as a cargo pilot. He was scrolling through his datapad when he felt it, a presence. A chill ran down his spine. He glanced up and froze. Standing at the entrance was an alien woman, her silver skin shimmering faintly under the cafe's dim lights. Her emerald green eyes seemed to glow, piercing through the haze of cigarette smoke that lingered in the air. She was stunning, but there was something unsettling about her. Without a word, she walked straight toward him. The soft clink of her boots against the metal floor seemed louder with each step. Alex tensed, his hand instinctively drifting toward the small blaster concealed under his jacket. The alien stopped at his table, her eyes locking onto his. "You used to give me candy, human," she said, her voice soft yet firm. "Do you remember me?" Alex blinked. He stared at her, trying to process her words. Candy. What was she talking about? He'd never seen her before in his life. He cleared his throat, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over him. "I think you've got the wrong guy," he said, his tone cautious. "I don't remember you." Her expression didn't change. If anything, she seemed even more certain. She pulled out a small object from her cloak and placed it on the table. It was a crystal, roughly the size of a coin, glowing faintly with a soft blue light. Alex stared at it, confused. "You don't remember me," she repeated, her voice carrying a hint of sadness. "But I remember you. A long time ago, on a dying colony, you saved me. You gave me candy. It was a small gesture, but it changed everything." Alex frowned, his mind racing. A dying colony. He had been on countless missions over the years, but none of them involved aliens asking for candy. He shook his head. "Listen, I don't know who you are, but I think you've got the wrong person," he said, his voice firm. "I'm just a pilot, nothing more." The alien woman leaned closer, her emerald eyes narrowing. "You may have forgotten, but the past doesn't forget, human. And now, because of that moment, everything is about to change." Alex felt his heart rate quicken. There was something about her words, about the way she spoke, that unsettled him. He wanted to get up, to walk away, but he couldn't move. It was as if her gaze held him in place. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman straightened, her silver skin catching the light. "My name is Lyra, and I am here to warn you." "Warn me about what?" Alex asked, his unease growing. Lyra glanced around the cafe, her expression tense. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They're coming for me. For us. And if they find me, you won't survive either." Alex stared at her, his confusion turning into frustration. "Who's coming? What are you talking about?" Before Lyra could answer, the cafe's entrance slid open with a hiss, and two figures stepped inside. They were tall, clad in black armor that gleamed under the neon lights. Their faces were hidden behind helmets, but their movements were precise, predatory. Alex could feel the tension in the air shift as the other patrons grew quiet, their eyes darting toward the newcomers. Lyra's expression darkened. "It's them," she whispered. "We need to leave. Now." Alex hesitated. This wasn't his problem. He didn't know this woman, didn't understand what she wanted from him. But before he could decide, one of the armored figures pointed in their direction. A mechanical voice echoed from their helmet. "There she is. Target acquired." Panic surged through Alex as Lyra grabbed his wrist. "Move," she said, pulling him to his feet. The cafe erupted into chaos. Tables were overturned, chairs sent flying as patrons scrambled to get out of the way. The armored figures raised their weapons, but Lyra moved faster. She waved her hand, and a shimmering barrier of light, appeared between them and their pursuers. Blaster bolts sizzled against the barrier, but it held firm. "What the hell is going on?" Alex shouted as Lyra dragged him toward the back exit. "There's no time to explain," she said, her voice urgent. "Just trust me." Alex wanted to argue, to demand answers, but the sound of the blaster fire made it clear that staying wasn't an option. He followed Lyra as she led him through the winding corridors of the station, her grip on his wrist unyielding. As they ran, Alex glanced at the glowing crystal in his hand. He didn't know what it was, didn't know why this alien woman thought he was important. But one thing was certain, his life would never be the same again. The forgotten bond. The hum of the space station's ventilation system was the only sound in the cramped maintenance shaft where Alex and Lyra hid. Sweat dripped down Alex's temple as he clutched the glowing crystal, his breathing ragged. Beside him, Lyra crouched with an otherworldly stillness, her emerald eyes scanning the shadows. "What the hell just happened back there?" Alex finally whispered, his voice sharp. He had barely processed the chaos that had erupted in the cafe, let alone why this alien woman had dragged him into it. "They found me," Lyra replied, her tone calm despite the circumstances. "I was hoping for more time, but they're faster than I anticipated." "That's not what I mean," Alex said, frustration bubbling up. "I mean you. Who are you? What do you want from me? And why do you keep talking about candy?" Lyra turned to face him, her expression softening. For a moment, she looked almost vulnerable, a stark contrast to the fierce figure she had been moments ago. "You don't remember, do you?" she asked quietly. "Remember what?" Alex snapped, his patience wearing thin. Lyra hesitated, then took a deep breath. "It was years ago. You were part of a rescue mission on a remote colony, one that was on the brink of collapse. I was there, just a child at the time. My people were refugees, hiding from the storms that tore through our world. Most humans ignored us. They saw us as less than them. But you didn't. You saw me crying in the rubble. And you gave me a piece of candy." Alex frowned, searching his memory. He'd been on dozens of missions, seen countless faces. But then, a flicker of something surfaced, an image buried deep in his mind. A young alien girl, her silver skin smudged with dirt, her eyes wide with fear. He had knelt down, offered her a small piece of chocolate from his ration pack. She had looked at it as if it were a treasure. I think I remember," he said slowly. "But it was just candy. A small gesture. Why does it matter so much?" Lyra's expression hardened, and she leaned in closer. "Because that candy wasn't ordinary. It contained compounds that interacted with my biology in ways no one could have predicted. It changed me, Alex. It made me different." "Different how?" Alex asked, his voice laced with skepticism. Lyra hesitated again, then raised her hand. A soft glow emanated from her palm, and the air around them shimmered. The faint hum of the ventilation system seemed to distort, bending and twisting until it was completely silent. The glowing light expanded, forming a sphere that enveloped them. "What is this?" Alex asked, his voice hushed in awe. "A bubble of silence," Lyra said. "One of the abilities I gained after my transformation. My people are genetically engineered to be perfect, strong, intelligent, but also predictable. That candy introduced chaos into my genetic code. It unlocked abilities that shouldn't exist in our species. My people call me an aberration." Alex stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. "And now they're hunting you because of it." "Not just because of it," Lyra said, her voice tinged with bitterness. "They want to study me, to use my DNA to fix their problems. Our genetic perfection has become a curse. My people are dying, unable to adapt, unable to evolve. They think I'm the key to saving them, but they don't care if it kills me." Alex shook his head, struggling to process everything. "So what does this have to do with me? Why come to me after all this time? Lyra's gaze softened, and she reached out, placing her hand over his. Because you're the only one I trust, Alex. You were kind to me when no one else was. And now, I need your help. They'll keep coming for me, and I can't do this alone. Alex pulled his hand away, his mind racing. I'm just a cargo pilot. I'm not a hero. I don't know how to fight these people. You don't have to fight, Lyra said, her voice steady. You just have to help me survive. Together, we can stop them. Stop them? How? Alex asked, his skepticism returning. Lyra glanced at the crystal in his hand. That crystal isn't just a trinket. It's a key. It contains data that can expose my people's secrets, their experiments, their plans. If we can get it to the right people, we can turn the tide. Before Alex could respond, a faint vibration rippled through the air. Lyra's eyes widened, and the glowing sphere around them dissipated. They're getting closer, she said, her voice urgent. We need to move. Alex hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Whatever was happening, he was already in too deep to turn back now. Together, they slipped out of the maintenance shaft and into the labyrinth of corridors beyond. The station seemed quieter now, the usual chatter and activity replaced by an eerie stillness. As they ran, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a turn he could never have predicted. A single piece of candy, given on a whim, had somehow led to this, a race for survival, with stakes higher than he could comprehend. And deep down, a part of him couldn't help but wonder, had fate brought them together, or had he unknowingly set this all in motion years ago? The chase. The air in the station was electric with tension, a stillness that seemed to pulse with the impending threat. Alex and Lyra moved through the dimly lit corridors, their footsteps muffled by the echoing hum of the station systems. Lyra's emerald eyes darted back and forth, scanning for danger, while Alex clutched the crystal tightly in his hand. The weight of its importance pressed on him, though he still didn't fully understand why. You're going to have to explain this to me at some point, Alex hissed, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Later, Lyra replied without looking at him. For now, just keep up. Alex wanted to argue, but the sound of heavy footsteps in the distance silenced him. The metallic clink of boots on the station's floor reverberated through the corridor, growing louder with every passing second. Whoever was pursuing them wasn't bothering to stay quiet anymore. They're tracking us, Lyra muttered, her expression grim. They have our heat signatures. Heat signatures, Alex said, incredulous. What do you expect me to do about that? Turn invisible. Lyra smirked faintly, the first hint of humor since they'd met. Not invisible, just smarter. She stopped abruptly and pulled Alex into a dark alcove. Hold still. Before he could protest, she placed her hand over his chest. A ripple of cold energy spread through his body, making him shiver. The air around them seemed to shimmer for a moment. And then Alex felt lighter, as though his body were somehow blending into the environment. What did you just do? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Cloaked our heat signatures, Lyra said, her voice low. It won't last long, so move quietly. They stepped out of the alcove and continued down the corridor, their movements now almost completely silent. The pursuing footsteps grew louder, but they passed by without stopping, the armored figures oblivious to Alex and Lyra, just a few feet away. Alex let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Okay, that's useful. How many other tricks do you have up your sleeve? Enough to keep us alive, Lyra said simply, her expression hardening, but not enough to stop them all. The corridor opened into a large maintenance bay, filled with towering machinery and stacks of cargo crates. The room was dimly lit, casting long, ominous shadows across the walls. Lyra paused, her gaze sweeping the area. This isn't a good place to linger, she said, her tone cautious. Too many open spaces. Then let's keep moving, Alex replied, already stepping toward the next exit. But before they could reach it, a loud metallic clang echoed through the bay. The door on the far side hissed open, and 3 armored figures stepped inside, their helmets gleaming in the faint light. They moved with precision, their weapons raised and scanning the room. Lyra grabbed Alex's arm and pulled him behind a stack of crates. "Stay quiet," she whispered. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he peeked around the corner. The soldiers were methodical, their movements precise as they fanned out across the bay. He could feel the tension radiating off Lyra as she calculated their next move. "We can't stay here," she murmured. "They'll find us." "Any brilliant ideas?" Alex whispered back, his voice laced with sarcasm. Lyra glanced at the crystal in his hand, her expression thoughtful. "The crystal. It emits a frequency they're tracking. We can use it as a decoy." Alex frowned. "You want to use this thing as bait. What if we lose it?" "We won't," Lyra said firmly. "But right now, it's the only way to draw them away." Before Alex could argue, Lyra grabbed a small device from her belt and attached it to the crystal. She activated it with a quick flick of her wrist, and the crystal began to emit a faint, pulsing hum. Then, with a swift motion, she tossed it across the room. The crystal clattered against the metal floor, sliding to a stop near a cluster of machinery. The soldiers immediately turned toward the sound, their weapons raised. Lyra didn't wait for them to investigate. She grabbed Alex's arm and pulled him toward a narrow service tunnel on the opposite side of the bay. "Move," she hissed. They slipped into the tunnel just as one of the soldiers reached the crystal. Alex glanced over his shoulder, his heart racing. The soldier picked up the crystal and examined it, but before they could react, the device attached to it emitted a blinding flash of light. The soldier staggered back, disoriented, as the others shouted in confusion. Lyra smirked. "That should buy us some time." Alex shook his head, his breath coming in short gasps. "You're insane." "Maybe," Lyra replied, her tone light despite the danger. "But I'm alive. And so are you." The tunnel led them deeper into the station, away from the main corridors and into the labyrinthine maintenance sections. The walls were lined with exposed pipes and flickering lights, and the air smelled faintly of oil and ozone. Alex felt a surge of frustration as they moved. "Are we just going to keep running forever?" he demanded. "What's the plan?" "Lyra." "The plan is to survive," Lyra said without breaking stride. "And to get the crystal to someone who can use it. That's where you come in." "Me?" Alex said, incredulous. "I don't know anything about fighting secret alien dynasties, or whatever this is." Lyra stopped abruptly and turned to face him, her expression serious. "You don't have to. You just have to trust me." Alex stared at her, his mind racing. He didn't know if he could trust her, didn't know if he even wanted to. But something in her eyes, an unspoken desperation, a flicker of hope, made him hesitate. "Fine," he said reluctantly, "but you'd better have a damn good plan." Lyra nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I do. But first, we need to get off this station." As they resumed their trek through the tunnels, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was being drawn into something far bigger than himself. And for the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. The revelation. The escape pod jolted violently as it detached from the space station, plunging into the vastness of space. Inside, Alex clung to the armrest, his knuckles white, while Lyra worked the control panel with unnerving calm. The hum of the pod's engines filled the small cabin, and the viewport revealed the endless black dotted with stars. "That was too close," Alex muttered, his voice tense. Lyra glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "It's not over yet." Alex groaned, leaning back in his seat. "You keep saying that, but you still haven't told me what's really going on. You drop cryptic hints, drag me into life and death situations, and expect me to just roll with it. Start talking, Lyra." For a moment, she didn't respond. She seemed to be weighing her words, her gaze fixed on the controls. Then, with a sigh, she turned to face him. "You deserve the truth," she said. "All of it." "Finally," Alex muttered. Lyra leaned forward, her emerald eyes locking onto his. "My people, my species, we call ourselves the Xyrans. For millennia, we have pursued genetic perfection. Every child born is engineered, every flaw eradicated. We are faster, stronger, smarter than any natural species. But there's a cost to perfection." Alex raised an eyebrow. "What kind of cost?" Lyra's voice grew quieter. "We've stopped evolving. Our perfection has made us stagnant. Our genes are locked, unchanging. For generations, this didn't matter. But now we're dying. Our birth rates are plummeting. Our immune system's failing. The very thing we thought made us superior is destroying us." Alex frowned, leaning forward. "What does that have to do with me? Or candy?" A faint smile tugged at Lyra's lips. "That candy you gave me, years ago, contained a compound called theobromine. It's harmless to humans, but to Xyrans, it's a disruptor. It introduced randomness into my genetic structure, something no Xyran had ever experienced. That randomness changed me. It made me an anomaly." "An anomaly," Alex repeated, his tone skeptical. Lyra nodded. "I can do things no Xyran can. Manipulate energy, bend light, even influence matter on a small scale. My people see me as a threat to their order, but they also see me as a potential cure. They want to dissect me, to extract the chaos in my DNA and use it to restart our evolution. But doing so will kill me." Alex stared at her, his mind reeling. "So you're saying that little piece of chocolate I gave you turned you into some kind of superhero?" "It's not that simple," Lyra said, her tone sharp. "The change wasn't just physical. It's in my very essence. I'm a living contradiction to everything my people believe in. And that's why they're hunting me." Alex ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. "Okay, let's say I believe you. What's this crystal then? Why is it so important?" Lyra's expression grew serious. "The crystal contains data, proof of everything my people have done to suppress evolution, to control their population. It also contains the research they've done on me. If we can get it to the right people, we can expose them. We can force change." "And who are the right people?" Alex asked. Lyra hesitated. "There's a human-led coalition, an underground network of rebels and scientists. They've been working to undermine Xyran dominance for years. They have the resources to decode the crystal and use it against my people." "Let me guess," Alex said dryly. "They're not exactly easy to find." "No," Lyra admitted, "but I know where to start. There's a neutral planet not far from here, Arion 4. It's a hub for traders, smugglers, and mercenaries. If anyone knows how to contact the coalition, it'll be someone there." Alex shook his head, leaning back in his seat. "This just keeps getting better and better." Before Lyra could respond, the pod's proximity alarm blared, the shrill sound cutting through the cabin. Alex sat up straight, his heart pounding. "What now?" Lyra's hands flew over the controls, her expression tense. "They found us." Alex glanced out the viewport and saw a sleek Xyran vessel closing in fast. Its angular design and glowing energy weapons left no doubt about its intentions. "Can we outrun them?" Alex asked, his voice tinged with desperation. Lyra's jaw tightened. "Not in this pod." "Well, what's the plan then?" Alex demanded. Lyra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pressed a series of buttons on the control panel, and the pod's engines roared to life. The sudden burst of speed threw Alex back against his seat. "I'm buying us time," Lyra said. "Get ready to eject." "Eject," Alex shouted. "Into what?" "Space. There's a debris field ahead," Lyra said, pointing to the viewport. "We can hide there. The pod will be a decoy." Alex stared at her, his mind racing. "This is insane." "It's the only way," Lyra said firmly. "Trust me." Before he could argue, the pod jolted violently as the HFY ship fired a warning shot. Lyra didn't hesitate. She slammed her hand onto the eject button, and the pod's hatch blew open. A split second later, Alex felt himself being pulled into the void, the icy chill of space seeping through his suit. The debris field loomed ahead, a chaotic mess of shattered ships and floating wreckage. Lyra was beside him, her form glowing faintly as she activated a small device on her belt. A shimmering field enveloped them, shielding them from the worst of the vacuum. "Follow me," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. Together, they maneuvered through the debris, using the wreckage to stay hidden. The HFY ship slowed as it scanned the area, its searchlights cutting through the darkness. Alex's heart pounded as they slipped from one piece of cover to the next. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the HFY ship moved on, its engines flaring as it disappeared into the distance. Alex let out a shaky breath, his body trembling. "That," he said, his voice hoarse, "was the craziest thing I've ever done." Lyra smiled faintly. "You'll get used to it." As they floated in the relative safety of the debris field, Alex couldn't help but feel a grudging respect for the alien woman who had turned his life upside down. She was a mystery, a paradox, and perhaps the only hope for her dying people. The Alliance, the rogue planet Arion 4, hung in space like a jewel set against the dark canvas of the cosmos. Its surface shimmered with neon lights visible even from orbit, a chaotic web of trade hubs, black markets, and sprawling slums. It was a haven for outlaws, smugglers, and anyone who valued anonymity. For Alex, it felt like a ticking time bomb. As their stolen freighter entered the planet's atmosphere, Alex tightened his grip on the armrests of his seat. The turbulence rattled the cockpit, but Lyra remained calm, her hands steady on the controls. She navigated with precision, weaving through the streams of ships heading to the surface. "We're heading to Sector 12, Lyra said, her voice calm but firm. "It's the most densely populated area. That's where we'll find our contact." Alex glanced at her skeptically. "And this contact of yours, we can trust them?" Lyra didn't look at him. "Trust is a luxury we don't have. But we don't have many options, either." "That's comforting," Alex muttered under his breath. The freighter landed with a hiss of hydraulic steam on a grimy docking platform. The city around them was alive with noise and movement. Alien vendors shouted over one another in a cacophony of languages, while shady figures disappeared into dark alleys. The air smelled of ozone and spices, with a faint metallic tang. "This place screams bad idea," Alex said as they descended the freighter's ramp. Lyra glanced at him with a faint smirk. "You'd fit right in." As they made their way through the crowded streets, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He kept one hand near the blaster tucked under his jacket, his eyes scanning the crowd. Lyra, however, moved with purpose, her emerald eyes focused ahead. They'd reached a dimly lit cantina at the edge of the sector, its neon sign flickering erratically. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and the scent of spilled drinks. A mix of species filled the room, their conversations a low hum of activity. Lyra led Alex to a booth in the far corner, where a hooded figure waited. "Is this the part where we get double-crossed?" Alex whispered. Lyra shot him a warning look before addressing the hooded figure. "Tarek," she said, her tone neutral. "It's been a long time." The figure lowered their hood, revealing a grizzled alien with a patchwork of scars across his face. His skin was a deep shade of blue, his eyes a piercing yellow. He studied Lyra for a moment before nodding. "Lyra," Tarek said, his voice gravelly. "I wasn't sure you'd make it." "Neither were we," Lyra replied. "Do you still have the network?" Tarek leaned back in his seat, his gaze flicking to Alex. "Who's the human?" "A friend," Lyra said, "and someone I trust." Alex raised an eyebrow. That makes one of us. Tarek chuckled. A low, rumbling sound. I like him. He's got spirit. He turned back to Lyra. The network's still active, but it's more dangerous than ever. Your people have increased their patrols. Anyone caught aiding the resistance is executed on sight. That's why we need your help, Lyra said. She placed the glowing crystal on the table, its faint blue light casting eerie shadows. This has the information we need to bring them down. We just need to get it to the coalition. Tarek's eyes widened slightly as he studied the crystal. You're playing a dangerous game, Lyra. If the Xirans find out you have this, they already know, Lyra said flatly. That's why we don't have time to waste. Tarek sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. There's a smuggler leaving tonight. He can get you to the coalition's base, but it won't be cheap, and you'll have to be careful. The Xirans have spies everywhere. Money isn't an issue, Lyra said. We'll take the deal. Alex frowned. Wait a minute. Who put you in charge of our non-existent budget? Lyra ignored him, her focus on Tarek. Where can we find this smuggler? Tarek gestured to a back room. He's here, but I warn you, he's not exactly reliable. Define not reliable, Alex said warily. Let's just say he's more interested in profit than loyalty, Tarek replied. But he's the best chance you've got. Before Alex could argue, Lyra stood and motioned for him to follow. They made their way to the back room, where a wiry human with a crooked grin sat at a cluttered table. He was surrounded by crates of contraband, from illegal weapons to exotic spices. You must be the desperate ones, the smuggler said, his grin widening. Call me Jax. I hear you need a ride. Lyra nodded. We need to get to the coalition. Jax leaned back in his chair, his grin fading slightly. That's a tall order. The coalition's base isn't exactly a tourist destination, and getting there with this heat on you, that's going to cost extra. How much? Lyra asked. Jax named a figure that made Alex's jaw drop. You've got to be kidding me. No credits, no ride, Jax said, shrugging. Simple as that. Lyra reached into her cloak and pulled out a small data chip. This should cover it. Jax took the chip, his eyes narrowing as he scanned its contents. After a moment, he nodded. Deal. Be ready to leave in an hour. As they left the room, Alex shook his head. I don't trust that guy. Neither do I, Lyra admitted. But we don't have a choice. They returned to the cantina's main floor, where Tarek was waiting. He handed Lyra a small device. This will scramble your signal temporarily. It's not foolproof, but it might buy you some time. Lyra nodded in thanks. We'll need it. As they prepared to leave, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. The tension in the air was palpable, and every shadow seemed to hide a threat. For the first time since their journey began, he wondered if they were in over their heads. But as he glanced at Lyra, her determination unwavering, he felt a flicker of hope. They weren't just running anymore. They had a plan. And for now, that was enough. The sacrifice. The smuggler's ship, a battered freighter barely held together by mismatched panels, jolted violently as it broke free from Arion 4's atmosphere. Inside the cramped cargo hold, Alex leaned against a bulkhead, trying to steady his breathing. The hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the walls, a constant reminder of their precarious situation. Across from him, Lyra sat with her back straight, her emerald eyes fixed on the glowing crystal in her hands. The faint light bathed her silver skin, making her look almost otherworldly. Despite the chaos they had just escaped, she exuded an eerie calm. You know, Alex said, breaking the silence, I've been meaning to ask. Do you ever stop to think about how crazy this all is? Lyra glanced at him, her expression unreadable. What part of it? All of it, Alex said, gesturing broadly. Running from genetically perfect aliens, smuggling secret data, trusting shady characters like Jax out there. He pointed toward the cockpit where their smuggler was piloting the ship, I'm starting to think I'm the only sane one here. Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile. Sanity is overrated. Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. You know, I'd feel a lot better if you actually told me the whole plan. The plan hasn't changed, Lyra said. We deliver the crystal to the coalition. They use the information to expose my people's corruption. With their support, we force the council to change. And you think they'll just agree? Alex asked skeptically. Lyra's gaze hardened. No, they won't agree. But they'll have no choice. Before Alex could respond, the ship jolted again, harder this time. The lights flickered, and an alarm blared. Jax's voice crackled over the intercom. We got company. Alex's stomach sank. He hurried to the cockpit, Lyra close behind. Through the viewport, he saw a sleek HFY warship closing in on them. Its angular design and glowing energy weapons were unmistakable. They found us, Alex muttered. Brilliant observation, Jax snapped, frantically flipping switches. Hold on, this is going to get rough. The freighter lurched as Jax dove into an asteroid field, the jagged rocks tumbling through space like a deadly labyrinth. The HFY warship followed, its weapons firing relentlessly. Energy blasts lit up the darkness, narrowly missing their ship. We're not going to make it, Alex shouted, gripping the back of Jax's chair. We will, Lyra said, her voice calm but firm. She placed a hand on Jax's shoulder. Just keep us moving. What are you doing? Alex asked, his tone rising with panic. Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she closed her eyes, her silver skin beginning to glow faintly. The air around her seemed to ripple, and Alex felt a strange pressure, like the calm before a storm. Suddenly, the asteroid field began to shift. The massive rocks moved as if guided by an unseen force, forming a barrier between the freighter and the warship. The HFY ship hesitated, its weapons momentarily silent as its pilots recalibrated their trajectory. Did you? Alex started to ask, his eyes wide. Yes, Lyra said, her voice strained. But it won't hold for long. We need to get out of here. Jax didn't need to be told twice. He gunned the engines, weaving through the remaining asteroids with reckless precision. The HFY warship fired again, its blasts cutting through the edge of the barrier. The freighter shook violently as a stray shot grazed its hull. Shields are down, Jax shouted. One more hit, and we're space dust. Lyra turned to Alex, her expression resolute. I can stop them, but I'll need your help. My help? Alex said, incredulous. What can I possibly do? Lyra held out the crystal. This crystal isn't just data. It's also a power source, a key to amplifying my abilities. But it requires a human to activate it. Of course it does, Alex muttered. Why not throw more insane rules into the mix? Alex, Lyra said, her voice softening. I can't do this alone. I need you to trust me. He hesitated, staring at the glowing crystal. Every instinct told him to run, to get as far away from this chaos as possible. But then he looked at Lyra. The determination in her eyes, the weight she carried, and something shifted inside him. Fine, he said, grabbing the crystal. What do I do? Hold it tightly and focus, Lyra instructed. Think about survival, about protecting what matters. The crystal will do the rest. Hours later, Alex sat in a small observation room overlooking the base's operations deck. He watched as technicians worked to decode the crystal, their movements precise and urgent. Lyra sat beside him, her posture stiff. You've been quiet, Alex said, breaking the silence. Lyra turned to him, her expression guarded. There's nothing more to say. It's out of my hands now. That's not what I mean, Alex said. I mean you. You've been running for so long, fighting to get here. What happens to you if this works? Lyra hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands. If this works, the council will be exposed. The coalition will have the leverage to force change. My people will have to adapt or face extinction. And you? Alex pressed. Where do you fit in all of this? Lyra's smile was faint, bittersweet. I don't. I was never meant to exist, Alex. I'm the result of chaos, of something my people fear. Even if they survive, there's no place for me among them. Alex felt a pang of anger and frustration. That's ridiculous. You're the reason they even have a chance. Without you, none of this would be possible. Lyra met his gaze, her emerald eyes shimmering with unspoken emotion. Sometimes, being a part of something greater means letting go of what you are. Before Alex could respond, an alarm blared, and the base was plunged into chaos. Ilara's voice came over the intercom. Siren ships detected in the system. They found us. The coalition scrambled into action, soldiers and pilots rushing to their stations. Alex and Lyra were escorted to a secure room, but Lyra stopped in the corridor, her expression grim. I can stop them, she said. What are you talking about? Alex asked, his voice rising. You've done enough. Let them handle this. Lyra shook her head. If the Xirons breach the base, they'll take the crystal. And me. This ends here. No, Alex said firmly. We'll find another way. There's always another way. There isn't, Lyra said softly. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Alex, you've done more for me than I ever could have asked. But this is something I have to do. Before Alex could stop her, she turned and walked toward the operations deck. He followed, shouting after her, but the guards held him back. Through the viewport, he saw Lyra step onto the energy bridge connecting the base to its outer defenses. Her silver skin began to glow, brighter and brighter until it was blinding. The Xiren ships approached, their weapons charging, but Lyra raised her hands. A massive wave of energy erupted from her, rippling through space like a supernova. The Xiren ships were caught in the blast, their systems failing as they were forced to retreat. When the light faded, Lyra was gone. The coalition leaders declared it a victory, the turning point in their fight against the Xirens. The crystal's data exposed the Council's secrets, forcing them to retreat and dismantle their oppressive systems. But for Alex, it was a hollow victory. He stood on the base's observation deck, staring out at the stars where Lyra had made her final stand. In his pocket, he found a small, familiar object. A piece of candy wrapped in shimmering foil. A gift from Lyra. A reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could change the course of history. This isn't goodbye, he whispered to the stars. You'll find your way back. I know you will. Alex gripped the crystal, its warmth pulsing against his skin. He closed his eyes, his mind racing with memories. The dying colony where he had first met Lyra. The chaos that had followed. The hope she carried despite everything. Slowly, he felt the crystal's energy merge with his own, a surge of power coursing through him. When he opened his eyes, Lyra was glowing brighter than ever, her silver skin almost blinding. She extended her hands toward the Xiren warship, and the space around them seemed to warp. The warship's energy blasts fizzled out, its engines stalling as if caught in an invisible grip. The freighter sped away, leaving the warship immobilized in the asteroid field. Lyra's glow faded, and she slumped against the wall. Her breathing labored. Are you okay? Alex asked, rushing to her side. I'm fine, she said weakly. But we don't have much time. They'll send more. Jax let out a low whistle. Remind me never to mess with you. Alex ignored him, his focus on Lyra. You can't keep doing this. It's killing you. Lyra met his gaze, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Sometimes, sacrifices have to be made. As the freighter sped toward the coalition's base, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that Lyra's words held more weight than she let on. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. This fight was far from over. The resolution. The coalition's base was hidden deep within the dense atmosphere of a gas giant, a feat of engineering that defied both logic and expectation. Suspended within the swirling orange clouds, the base shimmered like a mirage, its spires and platforms connected by glowing energy bridges. Alex stared out the viewport as their freighter approached, awe and unease twisting in his chest. "This is it," Jack said, his voice unusually subdued. "The last stop. From here, you're on your own." Alex glanced at Lyra, who sat beside him, her silver skin pale and her movements slower than usual. The strain from their last escape was evident, but her resolve hadn't wavered. "You sure about this?" Alex asked, his voice low. Lyra nodded, her emerald eyes unwavering. "This is where it all ends." The moment they stepped off the freighter, Alex felt the weight of 1,000 eyes on them. The Coalition's base was alive with activity. Humans, aliens, and even AI constructs moved with purpose, their voices blending into a constant hum. Armed guards flanked the entrance, their weapons gleaming in the dim light. A tall, stern-faced woman approached, her uniform marked with insignias Alex didn't recognize. Her gaze flicked over him before settling on Lyra. "Lyra," the woman said, her tone measured. "We've been expecting you." "Commander Ilara," Lyra replied, inclining her head. "I have what you need." Ilara's sharp eyes shifted to Alex, then to the glowing crystal in his hand. She gestured for them to follow her into the base's central command chamber. The room was vast, its walls lined with holographic displays showing star maps, tactical plans, and intercepted communications. At its center stood a circular table where a group of coalition leaders awaited. Lyra stepped forward, placing the crystal on the table. Its glow intensified, casting long shadows across the room. The leaders murmured among themselves, their expressions a mix of curiosity and caution. "This crystal contains everything," Lyra said, her voice steady despite her visible exhaustion. "Proof of the Xiran Council's corruption, their experiments, their plans to weaponize genetic engineering. It's the leverage you need to force them to negotiate or dismantle their power entirely." One of the leaders, a grizzled man with a cybernetic arm, leaned forward. "And why should we trust you? You're one of them." Lyra met his gaze, unflinching. "Because I've sacrificed everything to bring this to you. My people see me as a threat, an aberration. They want to dissect me to extract the changes in my DNA. If you don't act, they will find me. And if they succeed, they'll use what they learn to make themselves unstoppable." The room fell silent. Ilara was the first to speak. "If what she says is true, this could be the tipping point we've been waiting for. But we need to confirm the data." Lyra nodded. "Do what you need to do, but be quick. They won't stop hunting me, or this crystal."